Donald Trump's latest remarks are threatening to upend peace talks with Iran. The U.S. president says that as far as he's concerned, the ceasefire with Iran is over.
Is the ceasefire over? Is the ceasefire done? Is the MOU dead?
It's a very interesting question. To me, I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people.
Trump was speaking this morning at the NATO summit in Turkey. U.S. strikes targeted Iranian positions again overnight. The White House says that was a response to attacks on commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. That is all despite the memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran, which includes their ceasefire and is aimed at a permanent truce. Trump now says he no longer wants to negotiate with Tehran. We have you covered on all angles for the final day of this NATO summit, and Chris Reyes is in New York, Anna Cunningham is in London, and Evan Dyer in Ankara. Chris, let's start off with you. What can we make of Trump's comments this morning?
Good morning, Juanita. Well, what can we make of the way Trump speaks? I think there's an understanding at this point that this is the Trump way. He speaks in streams of consciousness. The world has to follow how he feels about any particular issue in that moment that he's speaking, with some understanding that it can change at any moment as well. And that's what we've seen, particularly with President Trump's very public negotiations with Iran, where he'll make serious threats. Some of it there'll be follow through, Juanita, but other times there's a walking back of the statement, or it doesn't come to fruition. One perfect example of that is when Trump warned that U.S. strikes could take out a whole civilization. You remember that was in April, only to sign a ceasefire deal with Iran soon after. Now, with this recent trading of strikes, the president is once again using extreme language. It's hard to tell what, if any, effect this will have on any kind of backroom negotiations that may or may not be happening between his administration and Iranian brokers. Have a listen to the full statement from President Trump.
They're sick. There's something wrong with them. We said, go and do your funeral stuff. And instead of that, they start shooting rockets at ships yesterday. And so we hit them very hard last night, very hard. I would say 20-1, 20 times tougher. And I told them, every time you hit, we hit. And of course, they're dirty players, so they go after everyone, probably including me. I've been #1 on their list for years. And they're a bunch of scum, you want to know the truth. They're scum.
Now, Juanita, even with that harsh language, President Trump also added that talks will continue between his administration and Iranian brokers. Remember, this memorandum of understanding was signed on June 17, and at the time, both sides gave themselves 60 days to come up with a more firm agreement. There's still 30 days left for both sides to work this out. We'll know more when President Trump speaks to reporters a little after 9 a.m. Eastern today.
Thank you so much, Chris. And let's move over now to Anna Cunningham. She joins us from London. So, Anna, how serious an escalation is this between the U.S. and Iran?
Well, Juanita, it is serious enough for the UN's Maritime Agency to urge shipping operators to stop sailing through the Strait of Hormuz. Let's just bring you in some footage of the US strikes overnight. I think we can show you the Bandar Abbas footage in Iran. You can see this was earlier in the night, those fresh waves of US strikes hitting this port city, large explosions and resulting fires. Now, these US strikes do appear to have been clustered around the coastline along the Strait of Hormuz. Let's just bring up the US Central Command footage that they have released, showing the strikes. They say that they targeted Iranian air defense systems, port and coastal surveillance systems, as well as ground-to-air missiles and launch sites for, they said, anti-ship cruise missiles and drones. Now, the US says it was responding to Iran striking 3 oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz Tuesday. I want to let you listen to something that has been shared by Reuters. It's audio only. They say they couldn't verify the exact time or location of this recording, but it does appear to be a distress call from a Qatari vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. Take a listen.
We are an LNG vessel loaded with LNG dangerous cargo. We require your assistance. Apartment is full of smoke. We are unable to assess damage.
Now, look, all this is happening as hundreds of ships have been stuck in the Strait of Hormuz for months now. And of course, they've been hoping to be able to transit through safely. Back in Ankara at the NATO summit, NATO's Secretary General has given his backing to the US decision to strike Iran. This is what he said.
Well, I think it was absolutely necessary because when you have a ceasefire and Iran is basically violating the ceasefire, we've seen what happened yesterday with ships being attacked, I think it is totally crucial that the US forcefully reacts.
Now, Juanita, Iran is claiming today that it has targeted US military sites in Bahrain and also in Kuwait. And remember, all of this is taking place not only weeks after that MOU was signed, but also during the 6-day funeral procession for Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He was killed in a US-Israeli strike on the first day of the war. You can see there, these are mourners in the Iraqi city of Najaf following this procession. It's expected that his burial will take place tomorrow in Iran's northeastern city of Mashhad, which was his birthplace. But at the moment, we have a situation where both Iran and the US are blaming each other for violating the ceasefire agreement. Juanita.
All right. Anna Cunningham in London. Thank you so much. Well, speaking before Trump's remarks, Prime Minister Mark Carney called the US response to Iran appropriate. Evan Dyer is at the NATO summit for CBC News and tells us that the new escalation in the conflict could disrupt the leader's agenda.
Well, of course, they're a distraction from what would normally be the main focus of a NATO summit, which is the defense of Europe from a threat that is primarily coming out of Russia. And that's certainly the thing that most European allies would prefer to focus on. I should say there's perhaps a special significance in this flare-up of that war because Prime Minister for Canada, because Prime Minister Mark Carney is actually traveling to Saudi Arabia later this afternoon. So basically, this strike has simply inflamed and brought back some of the resentment that Donald Trump has expressed in the past and expressed again today against his NATO allies for not choosing to join in this war. Of course, most of them found out about the war after it began, but Donald Trump has insisted since then that he would like them to join in his efforts to reopen the Straits of Hormuz and so on. And there have been various noises from different European allies about getting involved in one way or another, but they've all made it pretty clear that they don't want to be involved in a hot war, in a shooting war with Iran, although they might be willing to take on patrolling roles after there is an actual ceasefire in effect. But of course, as we just heard, that ceasefire now appears to be essentially null and void. We did hear Mark Carney, like Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, appear to lay the blame for this latest flare-up also at Iran's door. Let's listen to what he had to say this morning.
Iran attacked multiple times. They would call targets. We would call infrastructure assets in Qatar and Saudi Arabia and threatened shipping again. That's irresponsible. It's not right. And the United States has responded.
Mark Carney also said that he'd spoken with Donald Trump. He said that the president was in a good mood. I have to say that was not on display today. I mean, you just played some clips there where he sounded quite angry and he had other angry comments to make about Spain. He called the Spanish bad, hopeless people and said the US will cease to trade with them. Not quite clear what that meant. And of course, he also brought up the subject of Greenland again, saying that the US, not Denmark, needs to control Greenland, which is a very sensitive topic at NATO. I would say, in fact, that most NATO members see that as a potentially fatal issue for NATO if the US insists on pushing that forward.
Evan Dyer at the NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey.